26 лет назад в городе Дрейксберн исчез приходской священник по имени Саймон Макгроу. Официально– бесследно. Неофициально он просто пропал, и никто не стал искать. Спустя годы его сын, Дэниел Макгроу, возвращается в родной город, чтобы забрать старый дом отца. Но в пыльной Библии он находит дневник, а вместе с ним завещание, написанное за неделю до исчезновения. Так начинается расследование, которое шаг за шагом ведет к жуткой правде. Отец Дэниела был не только священником, но и свидетелем, и частью программы по очищению человеческой личности. За фасадом религии скрывалась сеть центров, в которых людей лишали памяти, воли и прошлого. На страницах дневника зашифрованные имена, даты, указания. На аудиозаписях голоса тех, кто исчез, и признания тех, кто молчал. Все сводится к одному. Однажды в этих стенах исчезла девушка, а вместе с ней вся ее история. Теперь Дэниел – последний, кто может ее восстановить. Но за каждую правду придется заплатить. The town of Dreiksbern was like something out of an old newspaper clipping. Shabby house facades, alleys where you could only hear footsteps, and a thick fog that covered the streets in the mornings as if not allowing them to breathe. After 26 years of absence, Daniel McGraw returned to his native Dreiksbern. The reason was grim. His father, a former parish priest Simon McGraw, had been officially listed as missing since 1998. But his will, written just a week before his disappearance, had recently been discovered. The house where Daniel spent his childhood stood untouched. The furniture was covered with dust. Old newspapers were neatly stacked on the table. In the kitchen, there was a kettle, as if someone had not managed to pour themselves a cup. Everything seemed frozen in anticipation. He found his father's diary, hidden in the back of an old Bible. The first pages were full of faith, hope, quotes. But the further he went, the more anxiety appeared. I know I'm being watched. Someone is rummaging around the parish at night. My attempts to contact the diocese are in vain. Some people at the Voice of Mercy Foundation have too much power. They do things under the guise of helping. This worried Daniel. The Voice of Mercy Foundation had seemed like a model of piety since his childhood. They helped shelters, built free soup kitchens, but his father had obviously dug up something. What exactly? The next day, Daniel went to the local library archives. The newspapers for 1997 to 1998 were full of reports on charity, but one article stood out. Loss of Reverend McGraw. City mourns, but questions remain. Signatures, none. Author, unknown. His attention was drawn to the lists of volunteers, where a certain Miriam Holt was often mentioned next to the name Simon McGraw. A face popped into his memory. The head sister from the parish school. Quiet, dressed strictly. As a child, she seemed like a saint. In the evening, he went to her house. It stood on the outskirts, surrounded by dry pine trees. A woman of about 60, with a piercing gaze, opened the door. "Are you Simon's son? I knew you'd come back." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "Did you know my father? I knew him better than he let on. And if you really want to know why he disappeared, you'll have to dig up too much dirt." She motioned for him to come in. On the old table lay a folder labeled Humility. Inside were photographs, letters, some receipts, and a map with an old abandoned monastery circled on it. "It all started there," she said, "and I'm afraid it all ended there." The next day, Daniel headed to the monastery circled on the map. Abandoned, with a collapsed roof and boarded-up windows, it looked as if God himself had abandoned it many years ago. He entered through a side door. The air was thick with damp. Broken glass crunched underfoot. The walls were covered with inscriptions. Veritas vincit. He who has seen must forget. One of the Latin phrases translated as, "Silence is salvation." In the main hall stood a confessional. Inside was a torn cassock and a rusty cross. But in the floor was a trap door, neatly hidden under a carpet. The lock was torn off, but the hinges had been recently oiled. He went down. The monastery basement was much larger than he expected. Narrow corridors led to a series of rooms that resembled cells. In one, there was a plaque with childhood photographs pinned to it. On the back of each was a name and date. Some were crossed out. Daniel felt the ground beneath his feet shift. What was happening here? In the far corner of the basement was a door, boarded up from the outside. There were claw marks on the boards. He decided not to open it, for now. As he left, he noticed movement. A hooded figure stood behind the monastery fence. Their eyes met, and the man disappeared into the forest. He hurried back to town and met with Chloe Drake, a local journalist who had been blogging independently for years and wasn't afraid to tackle tough topics. He told her everything. This isn't just a cult, Daniel. It seems your father knew too much, and you've only just begun to dig. Together, they decided to proceed carefully. Chloe suggested making copies of everything they found and passing the materials on to a reliable publication outside the city. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He reread his father's diary. On one of the last pages, they don't come for souls. They come for silence. He knew there was no turning back. The morning in Dreiksbern began with alarming news. The police discovered an arson attack in the building of a former boarding school at a monastery. The fire was quickly extinguished, but the cause was obvious. Someone was trying to destroy the documents. Chloe found one of the orphanage's former residents, a man named Grayson Kell, now living in a nursing home outside of town. His gaze was distant, but the memories of his past were searing. "We called it the Room of Light," he whispered. "It hurt, but if you complained, they'd say, 'Keep quiet or you'll go to purgatory.'" Daniel felt the rage building inside him. His father wasn't just missing. He was probably trying to stop something that had been going on for years. In the archives, they found medical records with initials but no signatures. Diagnosis, mental instability, unwillingness to obey, suspected rebellion. Treatment, isolation, occupational therapy, sensory overload. One file was marked with a red sticker, SR9, by permission only. Inside was a photo of a boy with bandaged hands. On the back, refused confession. Repeat in 48 hours. Chloe almost tore the pages out of the folder. Her hands were shaking. This isn't just cruelty. This is systematic suppression. And it was covered up. They made a list of the children mentioned. Most of them were either dead or missing. One of them, Sebastian Hole, was alive, and not far away. His house was in the woods next to a river. He didn't trust people, but when he heard the name Simon McGraw, he let them in. "He tried to save us. He left us notes. He said, 'If we ever grow up, find his son, he was sure that you would return.'" Daniel looked at him in shock. Are you serious?" He knew that he would be destroyed, but he hoped that the truth would not die with him. And then Sebastian took an old box from under the floor. Inside was an audio cassette and a key. "This is for the Room of Light, but do not go alone. They may be waiting for you." That night, Daniel returned to the monastery. Sebastian's key fit the door in the far wing of the basement. That same Room of Light turned out to be not a camera, but a studio. Inside was a one-way mirror, a camera, sensors on the walls, and microphones. He inserted the audio cassette into the old tape recorder. The sound crackled, then a voice, quiet and tired. "If you're listening to this, then you found the truth. They called it purification. I called it torture. My name is Elias Bain. I'm recording because I can't keep quiet any longer." The voice was broken, but there was determination in it. Elias mentioned experiments with consciousness, using light and sound to suppress the will. Children lost their memories. Those who resisted disappeared. Suddenly, footsteps were heard in the hallway. Daniel grabbed the tape and turned off the light. He froze behind the door. Someone quietly approached and passed by. He left the building without turning around. Chloe insisted. They needed to give the tape to the lawyers in the editorial office of Voice of the People. She also arranged a meeting with a former police officer, Mark Teller, fired for insubordination 20 years ago. "I tried to open a case on the disappearances. I was immediately eliminated. Your father came to me. I gave him some of the reports. The next day he was gone." Mark gave them a copy of the lost report, a complaint from a teenager named Elliot Reeve. Under the notes column, it was crossed out. Coercion, isolation, sexual abuse. Everything connected to the Voice of Mercy disappears. Papers, witnesses, sometimes entire buildings. Daniel was shocked. He was becoming more and more aware of the scale. How long has this been going on?" "Since 1964. maybe longer. But no one believed children, especially when everything was done in the name of saving souls. Late at night, returning home, he noticed that someone had opened his car. Inside, nothing was missing. Only a note on the seat. "You're too close. Stop before it's too late." The morning was hard. Daniel couldn't sleep all night. He listened to the tape dozens of times. Elias Bain's voice sounded like it was from another world, but every word rang true. Chloe managed to access the database of one of the closed medical institutions belonging to the same foundation. Inside are encrypted patient histories. The closing date is 1999. After that, silence. Among the names is Miriam Holt, the woman he dated at the beginning. The last entry, involuntary placement, diagnosis, paranoia, religious fixation, obsession with a cult, discharged. At the insistence of a third party. No date. He tried to contact Miriam again, but she was not at her address. A neighbor said that 2 nights ago she was taken away by people in a black SUV. Mark Teller, a former cop, gave a tip on a man named Lance Owens, a former monastery security guard. He lived in a trailer on the outskirts. Lance was drunk, but talkative. "Your father, he was the only one who came in at night to pray after everyone else was asleep. Then he started disappearing for days. He said, 'Pray for these children. They're innocent.'" Lance showed an old medal, engraved with the initials S.M. Simon McGraw. It was bloody. "I found it near Purgatory. It's a place behind the church storeroom. No one was allowed in there, not even us." That tip led them to the back of the church, where an old fence led into the woods. Behind it was a half-collapsed building, reminiscent of a crypt. Inside it was empty, just a chair with belts. And on the wall, "Repent or disappear." When they returned, they learned that the editor of Vox Narodu, who had received the audio tape, had been in an accident the next day. The car flipped on an empty highway. There was no video, no witnesses. Chloe was furious. "They were crossing us off one by one. We have to go all the way. If we don't tell the truth, it will be buried forever." Daniel nodded. His father's voice was in his head. "Keep quiet, and they will win. Speak, and perhaps you will save at least one." In the evening, they returned to the crypt behind the cemetery. Examining the floor more closely, Daniel noticed a slab of a different color. Under it was a descent, an old tunnel leading deep into the hill. Inside, a rusty door with a digital lock. But on the side panel, someone left a code, 1904. This was the year the monastery was founded. The door gave in. Behind it, an underground laboratory. Anonymous beds, IVs, monitors, old videotapes with inscriptions. Confession Control, Protocol 7, Resistance, S. McGraw, Final Session. Chloe was shaking. She inserted one of the tapes into the video player. On the screen, a child in a chair. The light hits his face. Voiceover. "You are not you anymore. You are now the saved. Repeat." The boy is silent. The voice, "So you will go to the shadow." The screen goes dark. The silence becomes deafening. In another room is a cabinet with notes. In one of the folders is the original of Simon's diary. The last entry, "If you are reading this, I may be dead. But I hope you are stronger. Do not forgive. Do not be silent." They decided to urgently transfer the materials outside the city. Chloe left first, but after 2 hours, contact with her was lost. Her phone was disconnected. Daniel contacted Mark Teller, who left a search. But an hour later, Daniel himself called with amazing news. Chloe's car was found empty. There was a tape recorder on the seat. The last recording was her voice. "If you can hear this, it means they got me. They were quicker than we thought, but everything we found is true. Don't give up, Daniel. Don't let them win." He was shaking. He knew. Now he was alone. But he wouldn't back down. Daniel hadn't slept for 2 days. The tapes, the documents, the diary. Everything was now lying under the floor at his house, hidden in an old suitcase. He felt he was being watched. He left Dreiksbern, headed to the neighboring state to the city of Harlow. There lived an old friend of his father's, Professor Randolph Hale, a historian who studied religious cults. Hale was shocked. Simon sent me letters. They contained excerpts from the writings of the Voice of Mercy. It is not just a cult. It is an international network. They have contacts in Europe, South America, and apparently even in the government. He showed Daniel a map. There were dozens of dots on it. All were places where children had disappeared or rehabilitation centers closed for abuse. It was clear to Daniel that the fight was going beyond his hometown. The news broke. Chloe Drake had been reported missing. The report was dry, without details, but Daniel knew it was the result of a purge. Together with Hale, they began encrypting and publishing documents in parts through closed forums, anonymously. The first articles caused a stir. Other survivors began writing for them. One of them was a former technician who worked at the facility. His name was Nathan Brick. He agreed to meet at a motel outside of town. When they met, he handed over a flash drive. "This is an archive, security cameras, magazines. I copied everything, but they were looking for me. If you tell the wrong person, you disappear." There was footage of everything on the video. Children tied to chairs, manipulation of light, confessions under duress, all labeled religious practice. Daniel reviewed the tapes looking for any trace of his father, and there was one frame that caught his attention. A man in a robe reading aloud, looking into the camera. His voice was familiar. It was Simon McGraw. He was with them? The voice was shaking, but Hale pointed to the background where Simon winked at the camera. He knew he was being recorded, and he was trying to convey something. Another tape showed Simon tossing a note into an air vent. It was an escape plan. He wasn't with them. He was fighting from the inside. Hale opened the file from the air vent and zoomed in. The piece of paper Simon threw into the shaft read, with difficulty, 46.3027 north, 119.2845 west. Hope, only at night. These were the coordinates. The middle of a deserted area not far from an old military base. Hale immediately tensed up. There used to be a psychological training station there. They closed it in the 80s. Or more accurately, they said they closed it. They decided to go straight away. But on the way, two men in civilian clothes approached them. One showed an ID card from the Internal Security Service. The second immediately asked a question. "Have you received records concerning the Voice of Mercy?" Hale played the stupid professor. Daniel was silent. A minute later, they were released. But it became clear. They were already being led. They reached the point late at night. Under the moonlight, the old building looked abandoned. But everything was working inside. Generators, monitors, cameras. There was not a soul inside. Only the constant sound of dripping water. On the walls were brain diagrams, notes, photographs. On one of the boards was a map. A name was circled in red. Daniel McGraw. Hale cursed. His name was not next to it. "They knew you were coming. You are the key, or the heir." They found the server room. Hundreds of files encrypted but labeled. Project Sanitation. Remorse Protocol. Phase 3, Identity Substitution. One file was open, a video message. Simon again. "If you're here, you found enough to believe. I knew they would erase, destroy. But you're my last hope. Don't let them rewrite the truth." The video ends. The screen shows the coordinates of a new point. 42.9371 north, 75.6107 west. Where it all began. Hale knew this address, the Diocesan Archive in New York, but it had burned out long ago. They're following our trail, or did he himself leave the path, knowing that he would be pursued? It was decided they would fly in the morning, and from that moment on, everything would be published in the public domain, without fear, the whole truth. New York greeted them with rain and gray skies. The Diocesan Archive was in an old stone building that had survived the fire of 2007. The entrance was closed for restoration, but Hale knew how to get inside through the backyard. In the basement is an old library. The books are dusty and moldy, but here and there are fresh traces. Someone was here recently. Among the boxes is a safe. No code is needed. The door was propped open with a piece of wood. Inside is a scroll of darkened parchment and a metal box with a sign archive number 42, voice. In the box are letters, letters, and more letters. The signatures are different. Father V, Bishop I, Dr. R.E., but the essence is the same. Reports on the results of the processing of teenagers. Subject 5. Boy, 13 years old. Behavior has changed. Admits mistakes. Prays incessantly. Memory loss, 43%. In one of the letters, Daniel saw a familiar signature, SM, Simon McGraw, but the content was different. I do not agree with the method. This is not salvation. This is torture. I refuse to participate further. There was a photograph taped to it, a little girl with the caption, Patient 7, partial identity substitution. Mother denies affiliation. They found journals with lists of names. Many were marked missing. Among them, Chloe Drake. Daniel collapsed into a chair. So they took her after all, until the end, until the very end. Footsteps were heard in the building. Fast. Sure. Someone knew they were here. Hale grabbed the box. Daniel put out the flashlight. They froze between the bookshelves. The door to the basement opened. A man entered. In a suit. He looked around the room. He hit the bookcase. You have 30 seconds to come out voluntarily. Silence. Okay, then we'll take everything ourselves. He left. But he left the folder on the table. It contained a recent photograph of Daniel. The caption read, Goal 1, important. Not to liquidate, to control. It was a death sentence. Or an invitation. They knew that the next step was to get inside the organization itself. Not just to expose, but to replace the structure from within, as Simon had once tried. Back in Harlow, Daniel and Hale began preparing an insider operation. Thanks to the professor's contacts, they managed to obtain forged documents for a conference of the Light and Salvation Foundation, which supervised the Voice of Mercy. The conference was held at the Rosemont Hotel, a full hall, cameras, a live broadcast, church representatives, philanthropists, officials. Hale was giving a report. The topic was the psychology of repentance in the framework of spiritual therapy. But in the middle, he changed the slides. In a photo of Chloe Drake appeared on the screen. This is not therapy. This is control. And she is not the only one. There was a noise in the hall. Someone turned off the microphone. But people were already filming on their phones. Daniel managed to run out into the corridor and handed the flash drive with the full archive to journalist Lynn Parker, who had been interested in the case for a long time. Publish it, even if we disappear. 20 minutes later, security guards burst into the hall. Hale was taken away. Daniel disappeared into the crowd. He knew that his face was now on all the screens, but the truth was too. The next morning, Hale did not get in touch. The last signal from his phone was the area of an abandoned airport. Judging by the GPS, a black car without license plates was heading there too. Daniel realized there was no one else to ask. There was only him left. He really was. Threats began to arrive in the city. Journalist Lynn received a letter with the words cut out. You don't know who you've gotten involved with. Delete everything. But she wasn't afraid. The report was published under the title The Church of the Shadow. What is the Voice of Mercy hiding? There were hundreds of comments under the article. Anonymous people shared similar stories, in different countries, at different times, but with the same system, purification through pain. Chloe was still out there somewhere, and if she could be brought back, if her memory could be restored, it was only through the destruction of the system itself. And that was Daniel's next goal. Through an underground forum, one of the anonymous people, calling himself Seraphim, contacted Daniel. He claimed to know where Chloe was being held. A former mental hospital at the foot of the Langton Mountains. Officially closed, but cars with tinted windows arrived there every week. Daniel left immediately. The drive took all evening. By midnight, he was at the fence. No guards, but the cameras moved as if alive. He knew. He had already been noticed. Having made his way inside, he found a staircase leading down. Concrete walls, lilac lighting, and silence, like in a tomb. In one of the rooms, a girl, thin gray hair, looking into space. He recognized her, Chloe, but she did not recognize him. Chloe, it's me. Daniel, we were looking for you. You're alive. She blinked, slowly, then she barely moved her lips. McGraw was right. Soon he heard footsteps, too heavy to be accidental. Daniel picked up Chloe and carried her out into the hallway. Voices behind him. There are two of them. He's with her. They can't be eliminated. They can only be brought back. The emergency exit went off in the basement. They ran through the ventilation tunnel, where the walls were covered with the words, "They are not gods, they play gods, but blood is memory." The same seraphim was waiting for them near the forest, wearing a mask and riding an old motorcycle. He gestured for them to get on. While they were riding, he said, "Simon left me the coordinates. The plan. He knew you would go this way. You are the last one who hasn't broken down yet." They reached an abandoned chapel. Inside was a safe, the key to which was held by seraphim. Inside were Simon's letters, photographs, and one map. The map contained all the purification centers, a network all over the world, with the tags active, cleared, in development. Chloe sat against the wall, hugging herself. She began to remember little things, phrases, voices. I was in the shadows, but the voice that held me, it wasn't theirs. It was yours, Daniel. He cried for the first time in all this time. It wasn't a victory, but it was a way back. To her, to himself, to the truth. At dawn, Chloe looked into Daniel's eyes for the first time and recognized him. I remember you reading Wuthering Heights to me in the woods. When we were hiding from the night watch, that was the first real sign that personality was returning. Not fragments, not names, but feelings. Inside the safe, they found another flash drive. Seraphim explained, Simon asked for this to be revealed only when it was all over. But it seems there will be no end. So it's time. The video shows Simon sitting in that very chapel. He is tired. His eyes are dull. If you are watching this, it means I couldn't, or I am not. But maybe it's for the best. Everything I did was out of fear. Fear of losing my humanity. He talks about Phase 4, a project that was supposed to replace not only memory, but will as well. People were turned into vessels, without a voice, without me. Simon managed to sabotage the launch, but he's not sure for how long. He says, the name of one of the curators is in your window file. Only you can decide what to do. This is your story now. Daniel opened the file. The names were shocking. One of the current cardinals, a world-famous businessman, the head of a humanitarian mission. Chloe squeezed his hand. If you publish this, you will be erased. Not just from the internet, from history, but if you don't publish it, they will continue. He nodded. They returned to the city. Lynn Parker helped again. The entire database was posted online with a note. Don't be afraid. We exist. We know. The reaction was immediate. Arrests, resignations. But some of the names disappeared. Forever. Some made it in time. Some have long been dead. A week later, Chloe recorded a video message. Her voice was even, strong. I am Chloe Drake. I am a witness. I will not forget. I will not forgive. But I am alive. Daniel closed his laptop. It was raining again outside. We did what we could, he said. But the story is just beginning, she replied.